Hello, and thank you for joining our webinar, Why Sourcing Has a Big Impact on Hiring Success. This webinar is presented by Daria Friedman, Principal Analyst with Brennan Hall Group, and Thad Price, CEO at Talroo. Thad Price is Chief Executive Officer at Talroo, where he provides leadership, strategy, and guidance to all departments to ensure the company is moving in the right direction with the right talent. With more than 15 years of experience in online recruitment and the job search vertical, Thad uses his cross-functional experience to turn client feedback into innovative products that help companies hire better. This webinar is sponsored by Talroo. Talroo is a data-driven talent attraction solution designed to help recruiters and talent acquisition professionals get the volume and quality of applicants they need to make hires. Through unique audience reach, custom niche networks, and industry-leading client service, Talroo enables companies to find their ideal candidates and reduce cost per hire. Talroo has earned a spot on the INC 5000 list of fastest-growing companies for 5 consecutive years. To learn how Talroo can help your organization hire better, visit talroo.com. And now, a little bit of background on Brennan Hall Group. We are a research and analyst firm that empowers excellence in organizations around the world through our research and tools. Our vision is to inspire a better workplace experience. We have world-class research, data, and expertise across all areas in human capital management. Currently, we have the following open surveys. These are in talent technology, learning and development, workforce management, and talent risks. We would love to hear from you. In exchange, you could receive free gift cards, research reports, and more. To participate, please visit our website, brandonhall.com, and click on Open Surveys. And finally, a few housekeeping items. This presentation is being recorded. The playback and slides will be provided to everyone within 24 hours of the webinar in a follow-up email. If you would like to download a copy of the presentation instantly, you may find it in the handout section. If you would like to ask a question, please do so by typing it into the question box for our presenters. And now, here's Daria so we can get started.
Great. Thank you, Quentin. I'm very excited to be here with Thad Price, CEO of Talroo, to discuss why sourcing has such a big impact on hiring success. Thank you, Thad, for being here to discuss sourcing.
You got it. We're very excited. A great opportunity for us and a great opportunity to share our findings and your findings together and provide more information about job seekers that we have access to every day.
Boy, I can't wait to hear all that. Thank you so much. So sourcing is one of my favorite topics, and I know that it can be very challenging. Recruiters and sourcers need to manage seeing the same applicants over and over again, or being inundated with unqualified candidates, or being confronted with extreme talent shortages. The thing about it is that sourcing has a major impact on hiring success and organizational performance. So it's really important that we all work together to solve this challenge. And fortunately, technology can help. So today, as was promised, we're going to talk about the state of hiring, best practices, and of course, the impact of sourcing. Thad will speak about how technology can make your sourcing efforts successful. Of course, we both look forward to having the Q&A session, so please don't forget to enter those questions in the question box, and at the end of the webinar, we're going to have a nice discussion answering those questions. So let's take a look at the current state of hiring. How are organizations faring in terms of hiring outcomes? And by hiring outcomes, I mean quality hires. So what's the actual reality? And the first thing to note is that organizations are losing a high percentage of potential candidates throughout the hiring process. And that's due to a variety of factors, starting with the online application, continuing through the offer experience. About 10% of the candidates are actually turning down offers. And so this chart shows a comparison of candidate drop-offs among high-volume hiring organizations, or those organizations hiring 501 or more employees a year, versus low-volume hiring organizations. And as you can see here, it's the high-volume hiring organizations that are losing a much higher percentage of candidates than the low-volume hiring organizations. It's about 40% more. And these percentages, just so you know, don't even capture those candidates who don't start the application or complete the login information. So in actuality, the loss is much greater than the percentages shown here. And I've seen huge percentages for that, including that. Now, from the recruiters and sources point of view, that can be very discouraging, because it's not just that they're losing candidates. They look at it like, oh my God, we're losing quality candidates, candidates that could be quality hires. And so there are several solutions that can help reduce the candidate drop-off rate, especially during the online applications. So for example, one of those solutions is asking candidates to join talent pools where they only need to provide very limited contact information. That's a great solution. And so if the talent pools are organized by interest area, they're helpful because the recruiter can communicate with those talent pools, run campaigns with relevant content, and can motivate them to complete the application and join the organization. And another solution is not requiring the applicant to provide a password to complete the online application. If you think about it, candidates apply to multiple companies, and if each company requires a password, you know, that's really a turn off to the candidate. So enough of this, you know, before, during the drop-off rate, and let's look at the first year, what's happening there. And so it's not only that organizations are losing candidates at the career site, but even after the candidate accepts the position, there is attrition to deal with. And most of that attrition for most organizations, about 51%, say that most of their new hire voluntary attrition occurs during the first 6 months. But that doesn't even include the bad hires. And on average, organizations indicate that over the past year, about 13% of their past year hires are bad, or perhaps they don't fit in with the organizational culture, or perhaps they don't have the requisite skills. And then again, 28%, a substantial portion of organizations indicate that on average, 28% of those bad hires are due to their own suboptimal hiring practices. But you know what? We're talking about sourcing and recruiting. And so how does that contribute to this situation? And it's all about the quality candidates that are being sourced. If those candidates are aligned with your organizational culture and meet job qualifications, it's going to lead to greater new hire engagement and retention levels. However, from Brandon Hall Group's hiring practices research, less than a third of the organizations have organizational fit criteria for critical roles. So without organizational fit criteria, it's nearly impossible to find the right candidates. When you don't know who you're looking for, you just can't find it. So now let's see another source, sourcing. And as further proof that sourcing contributes at least partially to bad hires, here's a chart which shows how organizations responded to the question, which broken processes contribute to bad hires? So the top mention is the interview process. And I think that probably, yes, okay. That's the interview process. And it's easy to see why a broken interviewing process contributes to poor hires. The right questions aren't asked. There's no criteria given for organizational fit. And of course, the wrong decision is made. However, about 25% of the organizations indicate that sourcing can also contribute to bad hires. That happens when the wrong sources are used, or there's a lack of understanding about the job qualifications and the candidate fit criteria. And so analytics and sourcing technology can help resolve this situation by identifying the best sources to use for each job category. And so now we'll move on to how organizations are continuously driven to hire new talent. And so to compound it all, it's that organizations constantly have to recruit and source new talent because they're filling those vacancies, and they're having to find difficult to fill positions. Of course, rapid growth does contribute to the need to sourcing, but most drivers have to do with vacancies and difficult to fill positions. And so now let's look at how important sourcing is to hiring. And for most organizations, they really realize that sourcing is important or critical to business success. But if you look at the percentage of organizations that are fully automated, I mean, there's only 30% of the organizations that have a fully automated sourcing process. And there's a dramatic difference between those two percentages. So, I know that many organizations have job posting distribution solutions, but one aspect of a fully automated sourcing process would be for the solution to automatically search for the best candidates from the best sources, all the while optimizing the budget. That would go a long way towards eliminating the tedium of selecting the right job board and checking the budget. So, Thad, I'm curious about what you have to say about automation here.
Yeah, great point. So, as we look at the world, for 15 years, 20 years, we've all been talking about this idea of post and pray, right? We've all heard the idea of, hey, I post this job on a job site. I look at sourcing from that perspective, and I, hope and pray that I get the right candidates. And, and if you get candidates, right, of course, it's about getting candidates and then making sure you're getting the right candidates. And so what's interesting is that this whole idea of automation around sourcing as one way around job advertising is we look at the world and say it really should be post and produce, right? You post a job, you use a service to post a job, and you produce candidates. And of course, as you produce candidates, you're focused on producing the right candidates. And I think that that's a big difference in our mindset, that as an industry we have to look at differently, this idea of post and produce versus post and pray. And this automation can solve a lot of that, ensuring that you have the right systems in place that are at time optimizing for you behind the scenes to find the right candidates for the open recs that you currently have.
Yeah, great point. So let's look at the talent supply now. And what we see is that there's substantial talent shortages, which are hampering sourcing. And I'm sure many of you out there are experiencing some shortages. In fact, more than half of the organizations indicate that they're experiencing a talent shortage in their industry. In addition, almost 3/4 of the organizations are struggling to hire talent, regardless of whether there is a talent shortage or not. And of course, there are always some organizations that are able to hire the talent they need regardless of the talent supply. And I want to hone in on that right now. And so how do they do it? Well, it's a combination of employer branding based on the organization's employee value proposition, effective sourcing, interviewing, a great candidate experience, and technology. What I'd like to focus on right now is the employee value proposition. Why? And that's employee value proposition is the alignment of the employer and the employee values. And so it answers the questions. Why do employees want to work for your company? What's attractive about the employment experience? Is it the culture? Is it the development opportunities? Is it the impact of the job? There's loads of questions that can be answered by the employee value proposition. And recruiters and sourcers really need to be fluent in brand messaging based on that EVP and deeply understand those values, because that's what's going to attract the right talent. And typically the EVP is based on your best employees, why they want to work for the organization. So it acts as a filtering mechanism. So those candidates that would be a best fit for your organization will want to work for your company. In addition, by understanding these values, you'll be better able to identify the talent that would be most aligned with your organization. And so now I'd like to move on to a really quick poll to see how your organizations are sourcing talent for hard-to-fill positions. So which of the following steps are usually taken first to source external candidates and select for hard-to-fill positions? And we're talking external, not internal. Is it to post a position to one or more job boards, to launch a CRM campaign, to post a position to a company career site or website, to search your own candidate database, such as in your ATS, or to search social networking sites? And so we're going to compare your responses to what our survey says. So this is just the first step. I want to assure you that there were a lot of other answer choices in the question, and that respondents were asked to rank order those answer choices. So take a moment to answer this one question, and I'm really curious to see how you're going about sourcing your external candidates for hard-to-fill positions. And so, Quentin, how are we doing?
Got a little under half voted. It looks like there's still some more coming in, so we'll give them another moment.
Okay, that's great. I think, I'm thinking back at what Thad said. It's not post and pray, it's post and produce. So I'm thinking about how organizations are going about this. Really interesting to me.
I also love what you said, Daria, around the idea of the branding is so important as well. What we've seen from people is that the conversation has shifted from job seekers where it's, why should I come work for you, right? If you have this idea of the labor market being so tight, as an employer, you should answer the question, why should I come work for you? And that's a very different thought process than we've had, which we'll talk further in the conversation in the presentation around. That's somewhat consumer advertising, right? Why should I buy from you?
Right.
Why should I buy your product? I think that translates in a lot of, a lot of the industry as it stands today.
Right. It's sort of turning the industry on its head, and it's making us all become more consumer marketing oriented.
That's right.
How are we doing now, Quentin?
We're doing good.
Okay, can't wait to see your results. Okay, wonderful. So I'm sure we all see this. So the first answer choice is the job boards. Second, 21% is the company career site. Then comes in 12% of social networking sites, and then a CRM campaign. So let's show them what our results are. And as you can see here, it's slightly different than the results that you indicated. For us, the first answer choice was to post the position to the company website. And to me, I think that's the most automatic and the most obvious move that organizations, recruiters, et cetera, can make. Placing job postings on job boards are very automatic too. But in order to effectively promote the position and find the right talent, this action really has to be very carefully made based on the job requirements, the job board itself, the past results, whether you got any quality hires from that source, the level of diversity represented, and of course, getting the most out of your budget. That's pretty difficult to do manually. I'm glad to see at least some organizations are searching their own candidate database, or their ATS as a first step. There may be some candidates in that database that could be qualified for the position you should always revisit. And so the point of this exercise is just to show that there's more to sourcing difficult to find talent than posting job descriptions on job boards. But let's take a look at it from a holistic, like all of the responses that were given. And this chart shows all 5 steps in the sourcing process, not just the first one like was shown in the chart before. And so the first column shows that the steps taken by most organizations, they typically are the career site, job boards, etc. But looking at the second column, we see that fewer organizations include campaign-type marketing, such as broad social media campaigns, CRM email campaigns, or event marketing. So let's think, and I love what Thad said about post and pray. It shouldn't be post and pray. It should be post and produce. So let's look at some of the most important changes to improve hiring outcomes. And, it's time to step back and consider what the best actions are to take to improve hiring outcomes. Sourcing is considered one of the 3 most important changes organizations can make to improve hiring outcomes, and it was only second to employer branding. So now let's go into the best practices in sourcing and analytics. And, now that I've painted a big picture of the state of hiring and that it's important to change sourcing, let's see how we can improve our practices. So these are just a few of the questions and challenges that are encountered by sourcers and recruiters. And I always say sourcers and recruiters because there's some organizations, recruiters do sourcing, and in some other organizations, just the sourcers do sourcing. So that's why I'm mentioning both. I just came back from a conference, and I frequently heard from many people the first question, that they're seeing the same applicants apply for the same position over and over again. How can I expand my talent pool? And so this is especially true for organizations that need to recruit locally, like a healthcare provider or a retail store or a fast food store. Here I have several recommendations. First, besides using an employee referral program, my recommendation is to look back at the sources that have been successful in the past, the ones that have yielded the best hires, and to use them. Second, try to connect with passive candidates, those that may not be looking for a job, but would be qualified for the job. So be more proactive about reaching out to passive candidates. Like you can find them on social sites, LinkedIn, Facebook, associations, and of course your competitors. Third, know your personas, who you're looking for. And I think this is really critical. Find out the places or media where your best hires spend their time. Perhaps it's a social group or an association or a trade journal that they read. Look at how you can connect with them at these associations and events and all different types of organizations and places. And fourth, make sure to expand your sourcing to underserved talent pools. And let's look at that in a little bit more depth and understand how that needs to be done. And, it always surprises me how few organizations actually expend considerable effort recruiting from underserved or minority talent pools. It's true for veterans, retirees, unemployed, and so forth. And, there's other groups that I could have listed there. And there are many educational and governmental institutions and associations which you can work with to form a relationship to bolster your sourcing efforts. So there's many ways to partner with these entities. Sometimes it's about rethinking the job qualifications. I know there's some organizations that no longer require degrees for certain positions. Other organizations work with high school students to help them pursue an associate degree to get them on the right career path. In terms of women who work who left the workforce, mothers, new mothers could be that, and some organizations help new mothers work part-time before coming back to work full-time. But the important thing I want to stress here is that you need to have a strategy and resources to work with these different groups. You need to have a point person who's going to be responsible for relationship building. You may need to have an additional language capability, or you may need to provide additional training, or you maybe need to translate that person's skills to the skills needed by your own organization. I'm thinking about military veterans, and their skills are quite different than skills used in organizations. So you need to be able to translate those skills and make it work. And of course, sourcing technology can really help reach out to these groups. Next are metrics. And critical to sourcing effectiveness is to use the right metrics. And the key sourcing metrics are highlighted in red on the right side. There's source of hire, percentage of diverse hires, percentage of diverse candidates, and sources of influence, or understanding all sources used by the candidate to learn about the company and the employment opportunity. While this chart shows the metrics organizations use to measure hiring effectiveness, I'm just going to focus in on that right side. For instance, source of hire captures the last source the candidate used before completing the application. However, that metric may not tell the whole story. As I just said, sources of influence would be more comprehensive in identifying the different sources that influence the candidate. And of course, when I look at this chart, the first thing I think of is, my gosh, there's so few organizations that are using metrics such as percentage of diverse hires and percentage of diverse candidates. How do you know that you're recruiting diverse candidates if you don't know who's in your talent pool? Recruiters need to understand which channels provide the best balance of diverse candidates for each position. And then comes tracking. And so in order to get metrics like source of hire, you need to track source of hire. And while the great majority of organizations do track source of hire, there's some difficulty. They may not get a complete picture of who's applying to their organization. If they ask the candidates, they may only recall one or two places they researched. And what about the budget? Who's managing that? And Thad, I know you have an important point of view here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you look at this and you think about tracking source of hire, we should think of this more like consumer advertising. How we track sources, where there's attribution windows. There's a lot of things that determine whether the candidate is attracted to a certain source or not. One of the things to think about is, in a lot of cases, employers today still ask the candidate, where did you hear about the job, and where did you find out about the job? And in that case, a lot of times the largest brand wins, right? Where there's been a lot of marketing investment, in a lot of cases that could win because it's top of mind, versus actually letting the systems and the automation, determine, that source of hire and where that actual candidate came from. So a lot of opportunity to optimize this process from tracking the source of hire, and very important. I will say that it's exciting for me in the industry to hear more employers embracing the idea of really understanding attribution, sources of hire, where the hires are coming. It's a great step for the industry, and a great step of how we're looking at the world, to really think of this as consumer advertising, right? We said earlier, it's not about, it's about why I should come work for you. It's about attracting the right talent to your organization that's going to succeed, that's going to be effective, but also understanding, and ensure that you're attracting from the right sources in the right places, so you can be effective with your budget. And consumer advertising does a fantastic job of this, and attribution reigns supreme in so many ways when consumer brands are investing in marketing.
Yeah, that's so true. That's great. Thank you. So now let's look at what would be the most effective sourcing channels. And so, as you're well aware, sources seem to be changing at a rapid pace, especially on the social side. And this chart just shows an overall perspective of which sources are viewed as most effective. And these sources can change dramatically depending on the position being searched for. For instance, teachers and nurses might not be found on LinkedIn. So sources and recruiters need to adjust their strategy based on all sorts of criteria: the job itself, the location of the job, the industry, the supply of candidates, and of course the budget. And automation is a great way for recruiters to manage and balance their sourcing efforts. Through machine learning, the solution can identify the best sources to use and control the number of qualified applicants needed, and of course, the budget. So let's look at job postings. That's another one of my favorite areas. And so in terms of candidate experience, job descriptions have the potential to really engage the candidate and help them decide about applying for the position. However, for the most part, job descriptions just do the basics. They just convey job requirements. And so now this is, looking at this, if you think about it, you add engaging or your job descriptions engaging, quite a few less consider their job descriptions engaging, and only about 29%, admit to it, and only 19% plan on improving job postings in the next 12 to 18 months. And I think it's a shame. I kind of disagree with some of these statistics. I don't usually do that. I think most job descriptions and job postings can be improved, made more engaging, and really help the candidate decide about applying for the job. And let's look a little bit more in detail about how we can make job descriptions realistic and engaging. Of course, we have to start with the job title, and you want a job title that's easily recognizable, one that that many candidates are going to search for. And I would also suggest that you look at your competitors' titles for the same positions, because you don't want your title to be totally different. And then, of course, another important aspect, and this is how you're going to make your job descriptions engaging, is to add some employer brand messaging in there. Now, I know the job descriptions need to be relatively short, but you have to have some compelling messages in there so that they're going to understand why they would want to work for your organization, so that they get a flavor of what it's like to work for your organization. And also consider the language that you use in the job posting. Sometimes certain words are more attractive to men or women. Some words are more appealing than others. So just be very careful with the language that you use. And Thad, I know you have a great thought on this, on job descriptions.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that we've looked at in this process around job descriptions is we've talked for a while about the idea of a rec versus a job advertisement, right? And so, in a perfect world, we would treat the rec as something that, lives in HR, and the job advertisement is something that we're using more like copy, right? Because you're trying to attract the right talent for your company. And all these things are very, very important. But one of the things that's super interesting, especially in a tight labor market, is that, when people are searching for a new opportunity or looking for a new opportunity, it is so important today that you convince them that this job is different than what they have today. And what I mean by that, especially people that are already in a position. So think of it like this. If I'm a software engineer looking for a position, if you speak to the requirements of the position, first off, why would you ever advertise the minimum? Who hires at the minimum? Everyone wants a rock star, right? Sorry for saying rock star, but it's the truth. Everyone wants an A player, right? And so why do we focus on the minimum when you really want the A player and what's going to be successful in the role? So that's the first thing, making sure that your job description showcases what the A player looks like, so you can attract the A player. And then the second thing, of course, is ensuring that the job is different than what someone else that may have a software engineer does today. Stand out, be different. So I think if we think about this as, okay, this is really copy, this is attracting the right talent, this is selling your company to this prospect. It has to be different, it has to look different. And then on top of that, I want an A player. I'm in a growing business, I'm trying to attract the right talent. I want an A player. Think about that in your strategy, and it will provide a lot of fruit in the future in growing your business and attracting the right A players for you.
Great point, Brad. Terrific. Okay, so now let's look at the impact of effective sourcing practices, because it can have a really big impact on your organization's hiring outcomes. And so first we're going to look at maturity levels in terms of talent acquisition. And so to understand where organizations are with respect to the talent acquisition maturity levels, we asked about three big categories of talent acquisition. First is sourcing, which includes recruiting and, of course, sourcing and recruitment marketing. Second is evaluations, which includes interviews, screenings, and assessments. And third is onboarding, which includes onboarding, pre-boarding, and possibly offer distribution. And we asked organizations to characterize those three big categories by the maturity level. So I'll go through this very quickly. And basically, it goes from level 1 to 4, and the higher the level, the better the outcomes. The higher the level, the more consistent and effective the practices. And so level 1 is reactionary. And so that's where the organization has no technology whatsoever, no consistent practices. And of course, they may not meet the organization's needs. Level 2 is they still don't have technology, but they're planning on getting technology, and they're starting to respond to the hiring needs, and practices could be inconsistent. Level 3, here technologies and all the practices are fully implemented, and the organization, the recruiter sources are able to meet current needs on a consistent basis. And level 4 is basically level 3, but they can project out to the future, and they're the ones building their talent pipelines for the future so that they can meet future talent needs. So let's see how organizations did with those three big categories. And if you take like a big picture look at this, you see that at level 4 predictive, the highest, few organizations for sourcing, evaluating, or onboarding or at that level. Then the bulk of the organizations are at level 2 and 3. But if I look at this particularly for sourcing, the first thing that it strikes me is that sourcing is reactionary. It's more reactionary than evaluating and onboarding. And I'm wondering, like, why is that? Is it due to a lack of automation or a lack of budget? Or not understanding the talent personas or the strategy? And to me, I think it's a combination of factors, but especially due to a lack of sourcing technology and strategy. Without technology, sourcers do not have any metrics to guide their choices. They're operating blindly, and therefore they're just reacting to requests. And so that's my perspective on it. But let's see what happens when we compare these different levels of maturity and see what the outcomes are. And first, we're going to look at the outcomes in terms of quality hires. And what we see here when we're comparing levels 1 and 2 versus levels 3 and 4, my gosh, levels 3 and 4 really outperforms levels 1 and 2. And in fact, for sourcing, it's about a 2-to-1 ratio. Organizations at higher levels of maturity are twice as likely as those at lower levels to see a good percentage of their hires be quality or at a very good or excellent level. And now let's look at engagement levels, because, it's not only quality of hire that counts, it also impacts engagement levels. And the same trend continues, where organizations at levels 3 and 4 outperform levels 1 and 2. And so if your organization is recruiting for fit or alignment with the organizational culture and values, your hires are going to be more likely to be highly engaged. Now, how is that done? A lot of your sourcing and recruiting success has a lot to do with employer brand messaging, and that messaging should occur in all your job descriptions, career sites, and in any medium that you're using to communicate with candidates. And if you're not conveying the authentic nature of your work environment, your candidates may be confused and they may not be right for your work environment. That's one of the big causes for attrition during the first year. And as I mentioned before, it's also important to have organizational fit criteria. That's going to help you identify hires, candidates that would be a good fit for your organization. Now let's look at technology that propels sourcing, helps propel, improve sourcing efficiency and effectiveness. And I'm just going to go through this very quickly. Next slide, please. And as you can see here, there are multiple solutions that you can use, and that the demand for those solutions is increasing. And so ad spend optimization, I think you have an understanding for that. Job matching, that's where the job is matched to the candidate is matched to the job, and that helps both candidates and recruiters and sources identify the best job for the candidate. Automated sourcing, we spoke about that. Natural language processing, that's where the solution identifies the best language to use in your job postings and other solutions. There's multiple D&I solutions, one where you can anonymize your candidate data before you're looking at it, and programmatic ads where you pay per applicant, so as opposed to pay per click. So now I'm really excited about that. Speaking more about technology. Thad?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. So from our standpoint, when we look at the world from Talroo's perspective, we look at how we bridge the gap with all of these needs of recruiters and talent acquisition professionals. So we like to think of the world as data-driven talent attraction, ensuring that we're using the data to attract the talent that you need to propel your company forward, right, and to fill those open positions that are important to you. And so the first thing that people ask me is, what does Talroo mean? Where does this brand come from? What's the vision around it? And, every day our team rallies around the cause of bringing talent and recruiters together as one. So from a data-driven talent attraction perspective, by bringing the talent and bringing the recruiters together, we can provide the list for recruiters, which is really interesting. And Talroo's, next please, as we look at it, is a new source of talent. So, we think of the world as the right talent supply in one platform. We have 3,000 tech partners that we work with, over 10 million jobs, and we have billions of searches that we're studying to ensure we're bringing the right talent together with the right recruiters, and all of that on the candidate's terms. And so what I mean by that is all messaging channels. So messaging channels could mean text, it could mean notifications, it could mean job alerts, it could mean site search directly. The whole idea is to create this way that we can use data to help you find the right candidates for your company. And from that perspective, we're very automated in how we look at the world and how we use data to ensure we're mining the right audiences for you to drive the candidates that you need. So we like to think of the world as better applications mean better hires. And so from our standpoint, we eliminate wasted ad spend. We can focus on job themes that are important to you. So, if you say I need only positions in Atlanta or Austin or San Francisco, we can ensure you're only investing there where it makes sense versus all of your jobs or recs that you may have open. And we're optimizing this for you. We're finding what's producing applicants. We're finding what's working for you and what's not working for it, and behind the scenes, scaling up what's working and scaling down what's working, the way that technology and automation should happen. We match jobs, so we built our own taxonomy where, from our standpoint, billions of queries. We're powering billions of queries each month, and we're hosting that job matching, right? So we're finding the right audiences for the jobs and matching that, and studying all the signals that we have at our fingertips to ensure we're matching the right candidates with the right jobs. And unique audiences, right? We mentioned earlier about how there's a lot of stale candidates. There's not a lot of new, right? And as you look at Talroo with our scale and where we're growing, we're a new source of talent. So think of us as a mutual fund approach, right? When you invest in some of the existing services that you're investing with today to attract talent, we should be one of those sources that you look at to help find unique audience and drive some different candidates in your marketing initiative to attract the talent that you're looking for. So that becomes very, very important in an approach of ensuring that you're reaching unique audiences and the right talents for your jobs. And we also mentioned that programmatic has been one of the more interesting technology products in the last few years, and we're highly compatible. So our thesis as a company is let's empower, let's empower and work with our companies that are embracing the idea of programmatic, and let's be a highly integrated partner with programmatic software that's out there. In that case, Daria mentioned, focusing on optimizing on a cost per application basis. How can we use the data that's provided to be even closer, driving the unique audiences, driving the candidates that's needed, but focusing on success and what's working? So we're one of the most integrated partners as we look at the world as a company focus from our standpoint to ensure that we're using that to our customers' advantage to drive efficiency. So it's about efficiency, it's about automation, and ensuring that you're attracting the talent on your terms that you're looking for. And our results speak for themselves. So if you look at how we provide that value, this was actually a quote from a leading applicant tracking system. Typically, our application to hire rate is double to triple what we get from other providers. So our applications get you hires, and that's important for us because that saves you time, which no one ever has enough of time, and it saves you budget as well. So again, playing in the idea of time, cost, and efficiency, right? The best products, the great services focus on time, cost, and efficiency and quality. So those are very, very important to us, and focus on everything where we invest and what we provide to our customers. Great. Questions?
Thanks, Thad. I can't wait to hear the questions. So everybody submit your questions, and Quentin's going to let us know what the questions are. Thank you.
Yeah, so I did see one come in here regarding job description wording / language. What are those words that speak more to men versus women? For example, what other? Let's see.
Okay, so I don't know that I can really speak to which specific words speak more to men and women. This particular solution has some sort of algorithm that identifies that specific word, but maybe the word manage or develop speaks more to one gender versus another. I can't really answer. I don't know. Thad, do you have any thoughts on that? There are words that kind of, convey a message that are more gender specific, and you may not realize it.
No, I can't speak to that specifically. I know that there's a great product in the industry, Texio, that's hanging their hat on providing that. So probably can find some pretty good information from Texio about how to dig into that and how that could be an issue, and I think even test a few jobs.
Right.
There was a little bit more of that question that I didn't see at the bottom. What other psychological aspects like that can we take advantage of? Sorry. But I think we've answered that. So another question for you, Thad, is Talroo global?
No, we're only in the U.S. today.
Okay. Let's see. Another question. Why would you want a fully automated sourcing process? You cannot automate a relationship. So if talent sourcing is about building relationship. Okay, let me try that. Let me try that again. You cannot automate a relationship. So if talent sourcing is about building relationship with a target audience, disturbing a job may not achieve that. Please illustrate that advertising will fulfill our talent sourcing needs.
Okay, so I would like to address that. And so when I'm talking about automated sourcing, I'm not ruling out the role of sources and recruiters. It's their job to develop a relationship with the potential candidates. What this does, especially in a high volume hiring environment. If you have 1,000 resumes to review every single day, or it's just very difficult to do. Or if you have a huge number of job recs that you need to post every single day and modify every single day, that's really manual and kind of tedious process. And so this just makes the sourcing process easier. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be that human touch involved, because you're the ones that are going to be looking at the different candidates, and you're going to be ones reaching out. It's not only about finding the candidates, but it's making sure at least they meet the minimum qualifications and establishing a relationship. And I think that's really critical to your job. So that's my point of view.
I'd like to add a little bit of color to that as well. In my world, when we think about the idea of automation and AI and a lot of the different technologies that are being used, it's about what should I automate that frees you up to build those relationships, right? And so, I've said before that we shouldn't take the human out of human resources, right? It's a relationship-driven business, and it's a relationship, and that's very, very important. But if we can automate tasks that are, that can save you time out of your day to do more of that and be more relationship, then as a business, we've invested in the right product.
Okay. Here's another pretty good question. What are some creative ideas to source candidates in remote locations?
I'll take a stab at that. I'm assuming, it doesn't say in the question whether the remote candidates have technology, but if they do, that is a great way to reach them. And also understanding who the candidate is. And you may have to work with an association or a group, even a church, or meetups or something like that to really reach out to candidates in remote locations. It depends on the remote location, whether they have internet access, whether whether you can reach them through a group or an association. Those are my thoughts there for remote candidates.
And a few thoughts from my perspective. I think you should advertise the job where the talent is once you've built a compelling story that remote location is better than the current place, right? So an example would be if, let's say you're advertising, you're looking for a software engineer, and it's in, let's say a small city in Florida, as an example, right? One thought process would be is you could advertise that job in San Francisco in the Bay Area, and in the actual job advertisement talk about how the cost of living is so different in this place in Florida. You'll be close to the beach, whatever it may be, and maybe you provide a relocation bonus or something like that. So I think, in any case, you have to fish where the fish are. And one strategy is to understand, where that is, and then think about it from a marketing and a copy perspective and say, how do I attract this person to move to this place? And a lot of times it's cost of living, it's livelihood, it's all these factors that are very important for people.
Right. And that's great. And I just had this thought because I did this study, and this one company had a remote location. It didn't have as much of a population, but because it didn't have that much of a population, it actually had a greater brand awareness. Everyone kind of knew about the company, and they really thought well about the company and all the benefits. So sometimes a remote location is very advantageous to the company itself, as opposed to being like right in the middle of San Francisco in the tech market where there's lots of competition. So that's another perspective.
Yep. Great.
Okay. Great. what about this one? So when there is a high offer drop rate, what are the first few things to be done to address?
So the first thing I would do is I would reach out, have a third party or someone that was not exactly involved in that hiring decision, et cetera, so that the person could feel comfortable answering the question and find out why. And as a matter of fact, I did that. And what I found out for this one particular instance is that, this particular company was hiring for a very high level position. And what the company neglected to do was introduce that person to the people that they would be working with. And so the candidate was reluctant to take the position because he felt like they were trying to hide something. So, that's just one example. So in my opinion, the first thing to do is to find out why and then address it. And then I would also look at how the offer was disseminated, and perhaps the reason is, maybe it was too long a process and they got another offer. There could be a lot of reasons, but I just gave you one of my favorite reasons that I actually learned. So.
Okay. I think we got time for one more question here. What are some best practices in terms of reaching those underserved talent pools, like parents who left the workplace?
Okay, so I actually was at a conference where we were discussing this, and in particular, what they did was these organizations enabled these parents who left the workforce, whether it's the mother or father, to, number one, come back and work on a part-time level, and also be able to still receive promotions, also to receive their benefits, et cetera. So that's a really great example of what you can do. The other thing is that when reviewing resumes, if there's large gaps in the resume, if you use sort of candidate anonymization type of feature where it kind of hides it, then you're making the decision. There's a big gap there because the person had left the job market because of child rearing or whatever the reason is. So you're making the decision based on the person's qualifications and not asking first about that gap. So that'll help you make a better decision. So, that's what I would say are the best solutions. And, like with any other group, I would say, look, if you're interested in working with that market, is to actually look at sites and places and groups where people would be in that market, where would be spending time, would be reading material, and reach out to them.
One other thought on that too would be to test a few career fairs. In the past, we've just some thought process around Talroo and our hiring efforts. We've attended a few career fairs, and in a lot of cases, when we attend those career fairs, there's a higher percentage of people going back in the workforce and new grads. So if you're looking for people going back in the workforce and new grads, there's definitely more. It seems to be more. It skews in that direction for career fairs. So that could be one thing to check out or to test in some of your sourcing efforts.
Okay. Well, I thought these were some great insights. Thank you both, Thad and Daria. With that being said, is there any closing thoughts that you would like to mention?
I'd just like to thank everyone for attending. It's always great to share some of our insights, some industry insight, and we hope that you all use this in your initiatives going forward.
Right. Well, thank you everybody for attending, and I really hope that this session was useful. And I know, what that has added to this discussion is really tremendous and a great suggestion. So, and thank you for those great questions too. All right. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.